to another episode of Pit Lane Parlay.
Welcome to another episode of Pit Lane Parlay. My name is host Mike Jokum. Our buddy George is helping me out today, as well as special guest Ryan Eversley, as we go through everything balance of performance. And for a short little intro, I will give it over to George.
Hey guys, and thanks Ryan for coming on. For anyone who's either unfamiliar with sports cars or doesn't like quality motorsport content or has been living under a rock, Ryan's a well-established Honda factory driver who's running a number of series, as well as one of the hosts of the wonderful Dinner with Racers podcast and now Amazon Prime show. With that, let's talk about BOP, and before that, let's talk about the first race of the season a little bit, since it is next week after all. Now, Ryan, you're running the Honda Type R TCR again, but this year with a new team and new teammate. How are you feeling going into the season opener?
Yeah, it's going to be a new experience for me. Thanks again for having me on, and anybody doing a podcast about racing, I think that's completely jumped the shark, and it's a totally horrible idea. So good luck with it. No,
Hey.
you know, it's going to be a fun year. I've got a really young teammate, Taylor Hagler from Texas, and she's been doing a really great job in several different categories of touring car style of racing. And last year in the former series now called SRO America, she had a couple of podiums. She got a pole position at Watkins Glen, which is one of the fastest places we go. So she's definitely not scared. And I think she and I working together will be pretty neat because I haven't had a younger teammate in a while. The last few years I raced for the Hart race team, which is like kind of a factory-based touring car program from the Ohio Honda factory. And my teammate, Chad Gilsinger, is one of the fastest, what we call gentleman drivers probably on the planet, because his full-time job as a Honda engineer, he works every day and then gets to race on the side as a benefit of being part of the Hart program. But Chad's very self-sufficient. He looks at his own data. He does his own setup. He works on the car. He doesn't need me to handhold or like train him. He's been doing it for so long. Whereas Taylor, still very new, 24 years old. And I'm going to be doing a lot more hands-on coaching with her than I have in the last couple of years. And the team we've signed with is the LA Honda World program, which almost won the championship last year. And they're based in Indianapolis by a company or a race team called LAP Motorsports, which formerly ran the mini factory program in the ST category. So they've won a ton of races. A lot of their crew guys are IndyCar engineers and mechanics that do the 500 every year when there's like a third or fourth entrant for some of these full-time teams and they need extra crew. So the team is really, really switched on. Taylor and I are probably the unknown factor going into it because we haven't worked together that long. And she is a rookie in IMSA. So it's going to be challenging, but I'm really excited about the season.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Well, I'll throw it back over to Mike. Sorry, we're talking over each other there a little bit. Throw it back over to Mike to discuss one of the two most controversial topics in sports cars, that is BOP.
Yeah, this is something I'm still trying to wrap my head around more so in the past year than ever. But Ryan, in general, if somebody were to come to you and say, what is balance of performance, how are you going to explain it to them?
Okay, so first and foremost, I need to mention that IMSA, which is the sanctioning body that I race in full-time in the TCR car, put out a bulletin last year saying that any public discussions about BOP could be met with penalties and fines of some sort. So I have to be very careful about how I word what I say. However, I don't disagree with the balance of performance idea. Basically what it is they're trying to stop somebody from being an overdog or having an unfair advantage, and they literally will change the performance of your car by adding weight, taking power away, maybe changing the ride height and suspension characteristics of the vehicle. And the name of the game basically being, if let's say Honda builds this awesome Type R Civic and it wins 9 races out of 10. Well, that's going to limit the people that have the Audis and Alphas interest in participating. So in theory, they're trying to make it a fair or even playing field so everyone has a shot. And so it's not a bad idea, and it's been around for a lot longer than people realize, but it also causes quite a bit of vitriol when fans of certain brands don't see their car getting the results they think they deserve. And then that's where it becomes kind of a hot button issue.
Awesome. I appreciate that. So I know, IMSA versus some of the other sports car series around the world has a different take on BOP. What makes IMSA's different than some of the other, BOPs around the world?
Well, if you look at IMSA, they're owned by NASCAR. So NASCAR has in this country, the most technologically advanced resources at their disposal because the budgets are there and they need it to do the things they do for the stock car series. So if you look at their resources available to them, they have quite a lot of staff. They have quite a lot of engineering background. And what IMSA has tried to do is utilize the data that's given to them by the teams by having the teams carry data loggers. Obviously, there's timing loops at all the racetracks. They utilize all the technology they can, including like our engine data from the Motec systems that like the race car runs and things like that. That works if nobody is up to no good. And a lot of times people are up to no good. So in racing, so weird. So basically, like we go to Daytona and everybody drives around and goes as fast as they possibly can. And then they look at it, and if there's one car that's clearly dominant after that event, they'll say, hey, we need to adjust this a little bit for the next race. And it's an extremely difficult job, and it's extremely thankless because no one ever thanks the series when they win a race. Oh, man, thanks to him, so we got great VOP. We were able to win by a mile. That was awesome. That never happened. So it's just one of these things that they take in as much data as possible. If you have to look at it, there's something like 50 cars in the Michelin Pilot Challenge Series, which I'll be in, plus 38 cars in the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona next week. So, you're getting up there towards 100 cars of data that needs to be looked through to see what's what. And it's not easy, and you have a small amount of time to do it. So they generally, I think, get it pretty damn close, IMSA especially. There are some series that get it way wrong, and you're like, how did you even get to this decision? But I think some of the things that we see are, especially in the early years of me having racing that was based around BOP, some of the decisions that were being made weren't necessarily because the car was faster, but the team was better. So I worked with a team in 2010 through 2014 that had one of the best engineers I've ever worked with, had some of the best strategy, and we had amazing starting drivers where a lot of the other cars had drivers that were quite a bit off the pace. So we were constantly getting good results, and it's because we had like the total package. And then the next season, the car we were racing got like 100 pounds of weight added to it. And you're thinking, well, hang on a second. It's not that we were the fastest car. We literally just had the best program. And so that's where a lot of people involved can get pretty upset because you're like, oh, okay, what's the deal? So whereas in the past we had BOP adjustments several times throughout the year, now it's literally in between events. And in some series, not IMSA necessarily, but in some series they do on weekend BOP changes. And I think that's a little bit much.
Wow. Yeah, that seems like a lot to worry about within a short period of time. I don't know how much you're able to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is when I'm explaining balance of performance to somebody that doesn't know anything about racing, they immediately turn their nose up at it. And again, I completely understand the reason we're doing it. We don't like Formula One, for example. It's awesome to watch because it's the pinnacle of motorsports and the technology is amazing. But when Ferrari dominated, everybody hated it. And now that Mercedes is dominating, everybody hates that they're dominating because, it's like kind of predetermined who's going to win. And that's the idea behind BOP, to stop that from happening. But eventually you can get too involved and then that makes it a problem. So what I tell people that don't race, especially when they don't get it, and I'm explaining it from a negative side that I don't necessarily think it needs to be the way it is that imagine if you showed up to run a foot race for the Olympics and it's you versus Michael Johnson, one of the fastest guys on the planet. And you willingly signed up knowing that you're going to race against Michael Johnson. And Michael Johnson does everything he needs to do to get up to speed and be the fastest guy ever. And you get there and they're like, the organizers go, well, hang on a second. This isn't fair, even though you signed up knowing what it was. And they put a weight vest on Michael Johnson. You go, whoa, hang on a second. So imagine we're watching the Olympics next summer and, Usain Bolt or whoever goes to run and they're like, well, he's too good. He wins all the time, even though he's just naturally more talented. Let's go ahead and put a weight vest on him. You would see outroar, uproar and outrage. So that's where it's kind of hard for people to understand. So what I often refer back to is that I think maybe the rule book needs to be a bit better to stop the big outliers, where a car shows up and it's extremely dominant and you're like, well, geez, because the manufacturer is building to the rule book. So if the rule book is tightened up quite a bit, like in NASCAR, they're not allowed to have very much difference between the cars, but the racing is extremely close. So I think a lot of things could be better if the rule book was a lot tighter. So there's two sides to it. I understand the need for it, but I think it could be a little bit cleaner if we started out with a much, more limited things that could be done to the cars.
That's fair. I definitely understand both sides there. One thing that I read, and I don't know how much you can really talk about it, but I will ask anyway, was that IMSA was trying to prevent much more this year in terms of teams sandbagging, especially at the Roar. Does the BOP help or hurt those who are trying to sandbag? And do you think IMSA's effort to curtail sandbagging has worked so far?
I can't speak on other people's behalf because I don't know what they're up to, but I just, as a racer that's been in the paddock, so in my test at the Roar, I felt like everybody in the TCR class was going for it. But it's really interesting when you have multiple teams that have the same kind of car, you can't control the other people and what they're doing. And the ego of a racer will always show up. If I have the chance to go be P1 in a class, even though my manufacturer doesn't want me to, it's really hard to go, yeah, I might not have a job next year and I'll need to tell people that I was P1 at the Roar and you might not hire me at that point. What am I, So it's one of those things where you have to be kind of like, a driver's always going to be selfish about their own results, but you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you. So in the TCR class at the Roar, I felt like everybody was going really fast, but then you'd see cars from one manufacturer that were P1 with drivers I've never heard of. And you're like, oh, that car must be pretty fast. And then you'd see the car, like the pro car for that team that has the best drivers in it, are like at the bottom of the timesheets and they're driving a lot. So you're like, okay. But there's always a way to hide speed, no matter what. There's always a way. You can run full tanks full of fuel. You can raise the ride height up. You can work on fuel miles. There's always certain things. And I feel like the series has done a really good job of keeping an eye on that. And they've even put in basically a penalty in the rule book that says if they think you're up to no good, you will get a 5-minute in race penalty. So there is a chance you screw yourself. It's just one of those things that I've said that I think 1,000 times. That's just one of those things. It's really hard for both sides because it's the series versus the teams and vice versa. And you can play ball and be the good team that gave IMSA what they wanted, and then they still might not help you. Your car still might not be the fastest thing ever. So it's kind of a chess game. And if you look at the teams that are super competitive, even when the BOP is not in their favor, they still get pretty strong results because they're executing on pit stops, driver changes, strategy with the fuel, being good in traffic, having the best driver lineup, because you could have the fastest car in the world, but if you have a gentleman driver that's off the pace, then, it might not matter in the end. So if you look at the history of the sport, especially since this BOP stuff has come up, there are certain teams that have been handed big BOP penalties, and it's because they're so successful, and then they still finish in the top 3 of the championship.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned there that I'm curious about. So if you sandbag during the Roar and you get a 5-minute penalty, that penalty is during the either your race on Friday or the 24-hour race on Saturday. So it's not a penalty during the Roar; it's actually during the race.
Yeah, exactly. Like they sent teams home in the past from the Roar if they felt like they were up to no good or they parked them for an entire session. I think one team at the Roar in the GTD class was actually having some sort of turbo issues, and I talked to one of the drivers about it, and he's like, no, we absolutely were couldn't figure out what was wrong with our car. No one could. The manufacturer, no one knew. And IMSA looked at it and went, oh, you guys are up to no good. And they were like, no, seriously, we're not sure what's wrong with the car. We're trying to fix it. And I think they were the only one in their class of that car. So it kind of, it's not like you can go to your teammate, be like, hey, look at your data and compare.
I'll quickly jump in and say that there were 2 GTD entries, both running single car or single makes in their class that got parked for a little bit. So talking to it, I don't know how much of it was an issue with the other car that didn't necessarily admit it on social media, but that's an interesting point that even if you're not purposely or actually sandbagging, you might get the IMSA down on you anyways.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess the reality is that the cream always rises to the top in this sport. The smartest people are always doing things, But we did see that 5-minute penalty show up a couple of years ago at the 24-hour, and it wasn't for actual on-track pace. It was for pit stop pace. They had assumed the Audi team's Land, I think it was, had this crazy fast fueling pit stop strategy that they figured out, and it was found that they were out of line with what they had shown for performance at the Roar. So essentially now they're getting this 5-minute penalty in the race, and they were the car to beat. So it's a pretty steep penalty to come back from.
Yeah, makes sense there. Before we move on real quick, is there anything else BOP related you think is useful for people listening out there?
I think the biggest thing is that it's for fans, especially. I read all the Facebook posts and forums and everything. For fans, you have to remember that there is no outright benefit for them for the series if one brand wins all the races. So when, for example, say Corvette wins 5 races in a row, and you read how all the Porsche guys are, this is crap, this is, IMSA is helping them and blah, blah. It's like, it's not like that. That's so naive to think that the series would want to alienate one of their biggest partners publicly and do it in such a, obvious way. So if you're watching, we've all made, internally in the sport, we've all made our peace with what this is, because it's probably not going away anytime soon. But it's become such a public thing that my personal thing I would do is I would stop making the BOP changes public. There's no need for the fans to know all these internal things when the series knows, or when the teams know. And you can talk about it a bit, but it's become such a big topic that it's in front of the show itself. And instead of watching these awesome cars drive around that you're like, oh, that's amazing, our fans are super smart. And they're watching going, well, if they didn't add that 10 kilos of weight or take away that gallon of fuel, they could have finished a lap ahead. And you're like, that's not what this is supposed to be. The fans are supposed to be enjoying these amazing cars and drivers battling each other. So I think removing it from a public point of view of hey, this is what we did this weekend would probably calm down the vitriol a bit.
Yeah, I've started reading the comments the other day after the BOP came out, and I didn't feel as smart as I usually do, because there were some people in there with some extremely smart takes, and obviously, you get some keyboard warriors mixed in there. But yeah, very, very interesting. It definitely helps me understand a driver's perspective. It's pretty cool to understand it. So I know George wanted to jump in with a BMW Endurance Challenge question next.
Not so much a question as a plug for the race. That's what Ryan will be driving in on Friday. I think I got the name right. It's always kind of a word jumble with those races. And I won't call it by that tire manufacturer's name, because we know you're a Continental guy, and that's what I got on my car.
No, that's okay. Michelin deserves love. They are supporting our sport, and they are providing a lot of financial backing to keep our show on the road. You know what I mean? So I'm a Continental guy. Everybody knows I'm a Continental guy, but Michelin is our series sponsor, and they deserve some love for that.
Yeah, right on. Well, in that case, it's the Michelin Pilot Challenge that you'll be running in. It's a 4-hour enduro. Check it out Friday. I don't remember offhand what time it goes green, but it's about midday. So if you're having a slow day at the office, definitely tune in. It's always a great race that's long enough for a lot of different strategy calls, but short enough where you can keep your attention on it the whole time. So with that, Ryan, do you want to plug the work you do for Pure NF and Cupids?
Yeah, sure. I for the last couple of years started actually at the Daytona 24-hour in 2010 or 11. They're all blurring together these years, but I got an opportunity to race a Porsche at Daytona, and on the car was this charity called the Children's Tumor Foundation. And I had never heard of it. In fact, I thought when I saw the car for the first time that the charity was for autism, because they had a logo similar to the Autistic Foundation with the puzzle pieces. And when I met these families and started learning about what neurofibromatosis is, which I had never heard of it, I was shocked to learn that 1 in 3,000 kids are being born with it. And it's a genetic tumor disease that can cause a life of pain, and it can also be fatal. And it was really eye-opening to see these kids that were so excited to see a race car go around and have their names on it. And so after that weekend, I was really I need to do something to be a part of this, to spread the word, because I'd never heard of it, and it sounds really bad. And as a kid, I had spinal meningitis when I was 2 years old, and I lost the hearing in my left ear. I spent about a year in and out of Scottish Rites Children's Hospital in Atlanta. And it was like, okay, I'm a survivor of a really, bad disease. Let me help someone else with theirs. So started doing as much as I could with the Children's Tumor Foundation. That led me to the Cupid's Undie Run, which is basically every February, creators of this charity, Chad Leathers, who's a buddy of mine through the Children's Tumor Foundation, he created this charity with his friends to help his brother, Drew Leathers. Drew is no longer with us because he succumbed to the illness, but Drew became a friend of mine as well. And basically it's a fun run. It's not even about the run. It's about raising money. And what they've done is they've created this charity where you run for about a mile in the city streets of whatever city your event's taking place in your underwear, literally in your underwear in the middle of winter. It's freezing cold and disgusting. And you get people to raise money for you. And so for the last 6 years, I think I've raised $175,000, and it's been through my fan base, like through followers in racing, and competitors of mine and teammates of mine have donated and taken on the cause. Andy Lally and Spencer Pompelli and Spencer's wife, Lindsay, everybody jumps in on it in Atlanta and kind of supports it, raises their money. So it's been an incredible thing, and I can't thank the fans for supporting it enough. I run for Kieran F. with Jack Atlanta, young man I met in 2010. He's about to be 15. I can't believe it. But his family, Jack Burke, and his dad, Jake Burke, have become like my family. And Jack has NF and has been through a lot of chemo and different treatments to help have a healthy life. And it's been a real tough road. But through my racing and Cupid's thing, being able to raise $175,000 and ongoing, I've currently got a link on my Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can look it up and donate or just spread the word. That would be a big thing for me. I'm really serious about it.
Yeah, thanks for talking about that, Ryan. Glad for all you do, and hope you make that huge number again this year. I think you were P1 in the country last year in fundraising.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. You get competitive as a racer, so you want to win. With the donations, and I've been P1 overall a couple of years, and a couple of wealthy individuals have done donation matching. So basically they'll start at 25 grand and say, like, every penny you put in, I'll match it, to 25 grand. So I end up raising 50 or whatever. And that's cool because it's all going in the same pot. But to be able to raise 20 something, I think one year we raised like $24,000 in one go, and that was crazy. But at the end, it all goes in the same pot. It all goes towards helping the Children's Tumor Foundation and fighting against this disease, neurofibromatosis and schwannomatosis. And yeah, it's been really cool. The fans are the ones that made this happen. I actually had a lady once that said, "Well, it's not fair. We don't have a racing fan base." And I was like, "Well, I'm glad I do," to raise all this money. So, but it's been really cool. And I can't do the podcast without the fans. Sean and I wouldn't have the success we have, and I wouldn't be able to raise the money that I've been able to raise without them. So it's been all about them.
Awesome. Thanks, man. And I'll say IMSA and IMSA drivers in particular in the fan base, in my experience, are super passionate about various charities. Ryan, thanks for talking about that. And I'll say it's really awesome, especially in IMSA, between the drivers, fans, whomever, that you can leverage the natural competitiveness and such caring people and passionate fans to really make a difference in the world. So thank you for that, and thanks again for coming on. Is there anything else you want to plug before we close out?
We just launched our Amazon Prime TV show. It's the same name as the podcast, Dinner with Racers. Very easy to find, and we've got 6 episodes that are going to be, 5 of them are already available. 6 ones going up very soon, and we plan on continuing doing that. And it's very much in line with our podcast, where we like to have a lot of fun and joke around, but also uncover some serious parts of the sport. And again, like, our fans have been nuts about supporting the TV show or the podcast. Now the TV show's taken on a life of its own. But you mentioned Continental Tire earlier. Couldn't do this without them and Acura supporting us. So it's been crazy. And you guys are starting your show, and you have no idea where it could go, because we literally, when we started DWR, Sean, my partner, Sean Heckman, was very smart about measuring expectations, saying, "Hey, look, this could go nowhere. I know we're excited, but this could just be a flop." And here we are 6 years later, millions and millions of downloads. We've sold a ton of shirts and hats and all sorts of crap. And we were able to pull off a season of TV, which, if you'd asked me day one if we thought that was going to happen, I would agree. And we've got people like celebrities in our sport telling us how much they love the show and how great they think it is. And it's just been incredible. So I guess anybody that's listening, if there's something like that you're passionate about, go for it. Like I can't believe we have a TV show. It's insane to me. So yeah, thanks for the fans to support that. Obviously our sponsors are a big, important part of it, but I met Dale Jr. earlier this year, and he, first thing out of his mouth, and I didn't assume he knew anything about me. He goes, "Hey, I love your show." And I was like, wow, this guy literally knows everybody in the world and takes the time to listen to our stuff. That's pretty crazy. So stick with what you guys are doing, and you never know what's going to happen with it.
Awesome. Thanks, man. And I have to say, I'm going to do my best to find an original Tim Richmond poster. It'll confuse the wife greatly, but hope to have that found and bought and framed up one day.
Yeah. The funny thing, we didn't really tell the story of how we got into that poster, but basically we were doing an Alan Kowicki documentary in Charlotte a couple years ago, and I saw the poster on the wall, and I knew about the poster because Andy Lally was in the Goodyear version of it, which is a more current one. And so I showed Sean the legend of the poster, and he had no clue. And I thought, well, if Sean doesn't know about it, and he's in racing pretty heavily, we gotta find out more about this, tell the story. So that's one of our episodes that's on Amazon Prime, and it's a lot of fun.
Right on. Thanks, man. Mike, do you want to close this out?
Yeah, Ryan, thanks very much for all the info and everything and your time today. Putting this together last minute. I appreciate it. I will share your charity links in our show notes and on the social medias over the next couple of days here, especially leading up to the Rolex. But again, just wanted to thank you for your time and everybody listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned a little bit. And we'll be back with another IMSA recording in the near future.
Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate having me on.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thank you.